Welcome, everyone. This is the Washington State Building Code Council, IBC Technical Advisory Group for December 11th, 2025. Can we please take roll?
Todd Byerther,
Here?
Roger Haringa,
Here.
Joe Mayo, I'm not seeing online yet. Che Fortaleza, not seeing online. Tim Woodard, not seeing. Steve Belzak,
I am here.
thank you. Lance Dahl, not seeing online. Hoyt Jeter, I'm not seeing. Sean Karlstrom,
I'm here.
thank you.
And Hoyt's going to be signing in a few minutes.
Not a problem. Todd Sullivan, I'm not seeing online. Bill Mybush, not seeing online. Brian Horstman, not online. Josh Mergens, not online. Trent Tinney, not seeing. Michael Shaw, not seeing. Brett Conway, not seeing online. Michael Barth,
I'm here.
thank you. Leah Summer,
I'm here.
thank you. Paul Clark,
Here.
thank you. Andy Leonto, I'm not seeing online. We don't have a quorum. Let me re-review who's missing and see if we had a couple pop in.
Okay. Well, as you're doing that, anyone like to be recognized from the public? Hi, Patrick. We can't hear you, but we'll record Patrick Haynes from BIAW. Okay. Anyone else?
This is Michael Gilbert. I'm from the city of Seattle.
Welcome, Michael. Okay. Well, we'll treat today's work session. We have a couple things to get through. You got it now, Patrick?
I think I'm there now. So
All right. Welcome.
Patrick Hanks from BIW for the record.
There you go. Thanks. Okay, we have a couple things to get through today. So today we needed a work session. We're going to try to sprint towards the end here. I'm not sure we'll get through in December, but let's continue where we left off last week on the childcare. Dustin, did you receive anything per our last meeting, and does everyone remember where we were?
I didn't receive any updated documents in between the meetings here, and so but with my notes, we made a motion to approve the opinion as drafted last meeting. Then some additional discussion on horizontal separation arose, and we had some hesitation as a result of that, and so we passed a motion to table. And I think get some more time for people to think about this one before we came back to this meeting on this one. But I didn't receive any new documents from anybody on potential content for the opinion or 2024 code language.
Okay. That said, did anyone contemplate this and want to bring anything forward in the meeting? Go ahead, Micah.
We contemplated it. I think we wanted to continue to table this and have more discussion on it and
Okay.
get more opinions on if this doesn't change how the code officials are applying the code currently, then there's probably no interpretation needed at this time, and that we would look to expand or possibly go into future rulemaking because there was discussions on existing building code and other things, and how this may or may not apply. And if it's not really affecting anything, then we wouldn't have to address it. So I think that's I know we kind of talked about coming back to another meeting, but I don't think it's been moved forward in any significant way beyond that.
I'm in agreement. I think that's what we kind of needed, and tabling it again is an okay answer today if we don't have any new information. But thank you for sharing that, because that I won't say felt like a big pivot last week. It's just something we hadn't really been talking a lot about. So if that's the direction we want to go with the existing, then let's take our time and get it right.
Okay.
Anyone else support or not support that? Michael, you support that? Good. Okay. Well, we're not going to take actual action to our motion to table it because we don't have quorum. So, but if anyone else has anything else to offer, we'll move to the next item.
Just a note on the quorum, we're sitting with 5 seats represented. We need 3 more seats to be represented before we establish that quorum. So when Hoyt shows up, we won't cross that threshold just yet. So I'll keep
Okay.
monitoring.
And just for everyone, we don't have to take the full hour. Our goal was to have a touch point here today.
Yep.
Okay, let's move into dwelling unit sizes then. And if I remember, it's been a little while for me at least. We have the topic summary matrix posted, correct?
Correct.
So we just want to jump in and see where we are, correct?
Yeah, and I posted one of these early, and then I made some updates to it here today to one of the things I did at last week's meeting was I added a new column to it for the National Healthy Housing Standard to try to point out the locations of these topics and requirements within that document. The sections that are left blank, are because I'm interpreting it to mean that the National Healthy Housing Standard doesn't specifically address some of these items. And also uploaded new from the last time we discussed dwelling unit size is the 2018 version of the National Healthy Housing Standard. Got the 2014 version with the David Neiman proposal, and then the 2018 was mentioned, and so I went online and popped that into our documents list. For the most part, the 2018 version is largely the same. There's some good commentary in there on some of the provisions in the second half of that document. But yeah, we didn't really get any hard mileage down. At the last meeting, we did make a couple talking points on the topic summary, but I don't have any of these specifically crossed off as finalized what we're talking about for each one of these topics here.
Okay. So again, our goal is to close this up pretty quickly. We can put language behind it, but the idea here is we don't necessarily have to go one by one. I think we need to now dive into kind of the key catalysts here, I'll call them. Which ones are the real deciders, and other ones might kind of be more secondary and fall into place after a couple key decisions are made. Is that an okay way to present this to everyone and then allow anyone to grab a topic? I think we've done, a decent amount of research on this. So does anyone feel they are not up to speed enough to understand the scope of the problem? Okay, not seeing anyone. Can someone offer or propose a topic then to zero in on? Go ahead, Michael.
And my unmute button here. Not necessarily a topic to home in on, but one of the thoughts I was having on all of this is here we are, they're saying, or the legislature is saying, we need to have something less than, whatever that square footage is if we define what a minimum dwelling unit has to include, such as the habitable room, a sleeping space of 70 square feet, habitable room of 120, a kitchen, and a bathroom that has sufficient fixture clearances and so forth. Why do we even need a minimum dwelling unit size? Because essentially we're leaving that kind of arbitrary anyway. And if we just drop that in its entirety, whatever an architect can come up with that includes the necessary pieces seems to be what we should be accepting, and not even pay attention to the overall square footage. That's my thought on it, because there's been so much discussion on where do you draw that line, and it's so arbitrary. We don't need that line if an architect can can figure out how to include the minimum pieces. That's my thought on it.
Michael, I'll say personally, I think you're right on. I think that we're defining the problem and not necessarily the prescriptive solution in that sense. Um,
Steve Belzak here. I agree totally with what Michael said. It just makes sense. We're designing around core issues or core items within the space. And as long as we have that developed properly, I mean, how you want to handle the minimum seems like an arbitrary issue. So I'm with you on that. Thank you.
it's interesting. So along this kind of line of thinking, obviously that's kind of what a performance code is. I just got up. By the way, if you're not tracking, we just had a kickoff meeting with NIBS, National Building Institute of Science. Is that correct? It was I guess you'd call it a non-government agency established in the 70s to perform standards, especially for HUD or to develop standards. And one of the things they're taking on this year, this committee is to establish these kind of standards for states to adopt and amend. Anyway, I don't want to take us off track there, but it's interesting that we're talking about this at the same time. Go ahead, Micah.
Thanks for that input, Todd, on what's going on with other groups and organizations. I know that ICC is discussing this as well and how this ties into middle housing and all this other stuff that's going on, single exit as well for national level. I did have some concerns with the comment from Mike and Steve there that throwing, or not necessarily throwing out, I'll put a nicer term for that, but getting rid of minimum dwelling unit size, I think is a simple item for just the dwelling unit size itself, but it doesn't take into account some of the other entirety of section 1208 of the code that has minimum room widths and ceiling heights, and then we start talking about habitable space. What does that look like in terms of the overall size of the dwelling unit? What's included in a dwelling unit? And are there spaces specific to those? And when I say that, you get into 12081 where it talks about kitchens having a clear passage of 3 feet, the rooms not having any dimension less than 7 feet. Those do, if you just go a 7 by 7 foot square, and I know that there's some folks who want to interpret it as a 7-foot circle, but that was discussed at the national level, and most everybody sees it as a 7-foot square. So that's still a minimum dimension. So you're not necessarily throwing that out if you just get rid of the minimum dwelling unit size. So what's the balance is kind of the question I'm getting at. And are we taking into account the rest of those items in section 1208 that deals with interior space dimensions? And then if that was the case they wanted to go with, then we would be alluding to getting rid of efficiency dwelling units as a whole, which I'm okay with. And I apologize that we haven't gotten you a formal proposal, but Dustin and Todd, I just sent you an email with some proposed language that goes to, what I've talked about before. And one part of that is eliminating the efficiency dwelling unit altogether, because if we're only looking at one room or at this discussion point, no room for dwelling unit size, then some of the other sections of 1208 need to be modified or removed. Thanks.
I think that's a great observation and comment there, Micah. It's to me, it starts to sound like the same conversations we're having in the development codes of kind of redundant. Sometimes we go by lot coverage, but we also have dimensional standards, and maybe we're putting a layer upon layer, and we need to actually just pick an approach, right? More of the dimensional approach, like you're talking about there, in lieu of an area approach, or maybe we don't get there. Go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to clarify. I too think it's extremely important that we do continue to define the interior space dimensions. Essentially, we do need those minimum room dimensions, the ceiling heights, the area of the room, the area for plumbing fixture clearances, and so forth. All I'm suggesting is the overall, where we have that 190. That's the piece that seems like we don't necessarily need to specify that. Because once somebody puts together a plan that satisfies all of the minimum interior space dimensions um, in their entirety, then whatever the square footage is of that unit is what it is, and it kind of leaves it more market driven or design driven, just to at least include those minimum pieces.
Is there approach and precedent like we see in other standards where we obviously have the enforceable code or language and then a design guideline to show us examples of how that of how that can be addressed? I'll park that for a second. Dustin, are you
Hey,
showing us? Go ahead.
this is Hoyt. I'm just sorry I was late, but I'm on now. So,
Thank you, Hoyt. Welcome.
What was the question, Todd?
Um, when Micah, I think with Micah presented, a month or so ago, the Seattle code language, there was a diagram of showing not only the dimensional standards that were required in there, but also an example of how they could be achieved, right? As one
Mhm.
possible solution.
Yes.
And so I'm making a distinction between that which is enforceable and that which is guidance. Were you looking for Micah's language or
No, I can bring that up. Yeah, hold on one second.
is that your intent, Micah, that we look at it?
That'd be great. I don't want to, jump in the line here on anything.
Nope,
So,
there's no line.
um, again, we don't have a formal proposal, but when I started talking about or looking at some of the other things that have been suggested, one was the CD rule, one was just going straight 70 square feet. Another topic we discussed was aligning with the proposed residential code language that was approved so far through the SBCC process, not the full SBCC, since it has to go through the public comment process still. But it was, to have one room of 120 square feet in the residential code and then not worry about the rest of habitable spaces that may or may not be provided. And I think that was kind of a balanced direction that Steve and Michael were talking about is, maybe not looking at it in general and leave it up to the design professional, but I think the balance would be to maybe provide this one room and then not look at the rest. So the language, if you want to go back to that screen, Dustin, the language you're seeing on the screen, the 30-inch change from 3 feet for the passage in front of appliances, that's in that small efficiency dwelling director's rule that another one of the tag members brought in and discussed. So I thought that would be, hey, that's an easy change if you wanted to have a smaller dimension there. It sounded like that was an acceptable change for folks from that CDU rule. And then again, I wasn't changing any other minimum room widths. It's still the 7 feet. Ceiling heights would remain the same, even if they're a little different from the residential code, which that's another discussion point if we want to align those. And then if you scroll down, Dustin, for me, I appreciate it. This is where it got to eliminating the 190, which was just mentioned as well, but it's maintaining that at least the one room of 120 be provided. And then you can discuss if you want to get rid of the sleeping units or their habitable rooms having a net floor size. Again, that'd be probably a pretty major shift that has to be evaluated. And then maintaining the exception that kitchens do not have to have a minimum floor area. You just have to provide that clear space in front of the appliances.
Mhm.
And then, of course, with this, if you're not looking at any other habitable spaces in a unit, then the efficiency dwelling unit just kind of goes away. It's it's defined. It's a defined term. I didn't put striking the defined term in there. I believe that would be appropriate if we went this route as well. But it only says that everything's provided in one room. But if you're only providing one habitable room and we're looking at a dwelling unit moving forward, what's the point in having this additional language? That was all.
That's great, Micah.
I think this was a path to try to find a balance, is all.
Yeah,
So
I
thanks for
agree.
looking at it.
Can Can I propose that if you scroll back up the top, Micah and others, since we kind of have, you know, like I always say, the brain trust here. Can we also talk a little bit about what the criteria we think this is trying to, what performance criteria or what requirements is it trying to meet if we're putting in different, in words. So let's start with like that first one, just the 30 inches, for example. What does that achieve? Maybe it's obvious to everyone, but if we were to actually have to write the criteria, what is it achieving?
I think it's just providing some minimum space in front of appliances. Usually when you look at these smaller spaces, they're not going to have full size appliances. In small space designers, if there's anyone on here wants to jump in and add more information to that, but you don't need as much space or clearance in front of them. So I think that was the allowance. Like, hey, you can get away with a smaller space if you're not having anything. A lot of these smaller units may not even have a dishwasher. If they do, maybe it's a cabinet depth like drawer that you pull out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you
but
don't need that big space.
some of this stuff seems like Captain Obvious, but it's like if we asked what would happen if we went to 24 inches and why is that in the code, right? Go ahead, Hoyt.
Yeah, I hate to play devil's advocate. A lot of stuff in the code is actually what Mike has said. Sometimes it's made up where people actually come to consensus and view. But at the same view, we're already putting in these smaller spaces. And I think clear width, unless I could see that even people that may have, minimum times for disability or wheelchairs that have to go in there. I know with the electrical wheelchairs that they have in there, I know these are not accessible units and things like that, but those are bigger. And that's why things got changed in the ANSI code because everyone has motorized wheelchairs. I'm not, I can't really, I can understand Micah's point, but I'm kind of more like, I don't see a problem. It hasn't been a problem before. 3 feet. I think between countertops and stuff, that gives people enough movement around there. It starts getting smaller when you start, 30 inches, 2'6" is pretty small. Even 3 feet is small, but I think the 3 feet should be maintained. And now again, I got to say, it's an opinion of mine for spaces that need to be used. I think that smaller space, 2'6". I just wouldn't want to touch that. Maybe in the future when, these have been put in a lot and been used a lot, maybe that would change. But right now, I kind of would like to just stay with the 3 feet. So
I guess
that would
Hoyt,
be my opinion.
maybe I'm the only one asking, but what problem are we trying to solve by putting this in there that obviously would be very bad
Oh,
design if
if you leave
someone
it,
didn't put clear
yeah,
passageway, but
yeah. What it basically is in the kitchen. Okay, people that are going into the kitchen is my understanding is they got to a point, two people walking by, a bunch of people working in the kitchen. It was kind of making sure there was enough room. It is actually in the code when I've gone back and talked to some people, it is kind of what they thought was the best distance. Okay. Now, someone say 2'6" is the best distance. I'm not going to push it, like what I'm saying, but I just making it smaller to make it smaller is not something I like to actually approve
yeah.
unless I know that's just my, why not change the minimum ceiling height to 7 feet? Okay, you could all of it. You know what I'm saying? It's already a smaller unit.
I think maybe that's what I'm trying to unpack. Is it a life safety consideration? Is it, I could see in ceiling height, we start to get, considerations for smoke or something else. I don't know. But obviously it's bad design, but I don't think that's what we're enforcing.
Yeah, but yeah, I guess I mean, you could change it to 24 too. People with 24 inches can get through. I just don't know. I mean, maybe it is something that we want to agree on, but it is something that I don't. It seems like with like front of an appliance, right? So the way I understand, like a oven that you open up, maybe they use a different type of oven, but that oven that opens up, you're still supposed to be able to get by it. When you pull open the oven, is 36 inches the right distance for that? How much space is between that? I don't know. So
Okay.
I'd have to measure it. So I know that's another thing that they talk about. That's why it says an appliance. The 3 feet is to be able to that 3 feet is not from when the oven door opens. That is actually from, but based on talking to people here, we're not putting an oven in there. We're doing like a microwave maybe or something. Well, in that case, you don't have that problem. That's why I understand the 3 feet came from. But
Okay. Well, I think we triggered some hands here, so thank you for that, Hoyt. Che, let's hear from an architect.
Yes, first of all, apologies for being late, and I may have missed one or two of these meetings in the past 2 weeks. Also, I did a thumbs up looking for the hand option, so apologies for that. Anyway, um, I am not really certain where the 30 inches came from and when that was brought up. First of all, the 3 feet itself does not even meet accessibility. So I'm not really sure where the 30 inches would apply. Is there a certain type of project that would allow for it? I don't think so. Like the 3 feet isn't it wouldn't meet code anyways. So why are we trying to reduce that?
Well, I guess I may be asking why is it there at all? Because I
Yeah,
would
right.
expect you as a designer wouldn't design something that's not practical, right?
Right. And I would say that either we leave it the way it is or definitely not reduce it. But like I said, 36 inches does not meet accessibility anyways. And
Mhm.
then if you're not a type A unit, you're a type B.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Che. We'll come back to that. Go ahead, Micah.
Okay, lots to unpack there. You're not necessarily going to be a type B or a type A, either one. You may not be either one of those. And so the reason the 36 was there, I'm sure has plenty of factors based on appliances or other things. But of course, and I said, 30 inches would be enough in front of appliances. It could be enough. I think the reason this language is in here, and I have to go way back to find the reasoning for it. But when you look at habitable spaces, kitchen is included in habitable space definition. And I'm sorry, some of the items are here are italicized. Habitable spaces should be italicized.
Mm.
So in this section, it gives minimum room widths for habitable spaces, but it gives an exception in the charging language that says other than kitchens. So kitchens don't have to meet that habitable space room dimension of 7 feet. So then if you read it that way, then what is the minimum dimension for a kitchen? There's not one. So what this is doing with the 36 inches is saying that you don't have to have the 7 feet, but you at least have to have some level of minimum standard for that kitchen for getting through it, getting, like Hoyt says, people in it using the appliances, things like that. So where the 36 inches came from, who knows? You're correct. It doesn't mean accessibility. This is not about accessibility. This is just about the unit size. When you look at these minimum room dimensions and accessibility, they're two separate items. This will not impact accessibility. If you have to have a type A or type B or even an adaptable unit, I think that's a type C. That's I think Tacoma uses those. Maybe I'm wrong there, wait, but that's a different animal. That has nothing to necessarily do with this section 12. Accessibility is outside what we're trying to achieve here, in my opinion. But the 30 inches, why you're lowering it, is 30 inches enough? It could be. For and Shay, I believe you're the one that brought forward Seattle's, and I'd have to tell everybody I do work for the city of Seattle as their technical development manager, but I'm not representing them on this topic at the moment. But I can speak to the CDU item. That does come from the CDU proposal that was brought forward by someone other than Seattle folks to this tag. So I was just trying to combine some of the discussion topics and proposals that have been put forward, including the residential one that is moving forward for the 2024 process, and somewhat trying to align the building code with the residential code. Lots of hands up. I'll stop there. Thanks. I'm sure I got
I'll
more
keep
to
going.
cover.
Thank you, Micah. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I agree with Hoyt. I don't think we need to go less than 3 feet. The other piece, there was a question in all of that about, does the code require it? And the minimum exit width in the code is a 3-foot door, which allows down to a 34 inch opening. If I haven't looked that up, so I believe that, is there. So yes, so I think that 3 feet is supportable in at least establishing a minimum for the movement, for just historical sake, and the ability to get in and out. Um, the other thing it does is granted it's not accessible, but at least with 36 inches instead of 30 inches, there's some potential of at least getting through there. When you consider a minimum 32-inch width for certain spots with a typical wheelchair. So if the legislation is kind of forcing us to look at all of this and to shrink, the legislation is saying, take the 190 away, but I don't think it's saying we have to pack everything into a refrigerator box either. I think there is still the necessity of having those minimum spaces and have them being realistic to function as designed.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to be clear, I personally am not opposed to 30 or 36. I just trying to unpack why we were making decisions. So thank you, Michael. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I would agree that even in some other codes they have 36-inch by the bed, and then a clear path to the exit is really what it kind of our codes kind of look at for at least like for a residential treatment facility. But the purpose for the 36 inches or 3 feet is typically an exit passageway, that the folks can get out of the space. And because these units are small, the kitchen kind of typically or might be on the way to the exit space. So that I think that's really when you put draw these certain size to meet the requirements. That's just kind of what happens, and you have to kind of just maintain that exit space. But I do agree that this is a great way to go because it's really responds to the 190 square feet that they're asking about, and I think this is a great path forward that would be a good consideration.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Micah.
I'll have my hand up a lot on this because I'll debate a whole lot of stuff with this. So I'm going to dispute a few things here. We're assuming that the means of egress from this space would be through a kitchen, and therefore you're requiring 36 inches for that. But that is not the case. That's a design issue or design problem. One of the other things that was mentioned is that the egress door is 36 if required. It is not. In R318 means of egress, the egress door for residential is a 32-inch clear space or clear opening. So again, it's not 36. So, and again, with this passageway, the passageway through the kitchen will be 30 inches. If you're talking about the passageway to the means of egress for this space goes through the kitchen, then that dimension would have to be wider. But again, if it doesn't go through the kitchen, it's just a design issue, and it could be 30 inches here. So we have to be careful on imposing something or code language on the design parameter as overall without it actually being what would could be the case here, if that makes any sense. Again, you may not have the egress go through the kitchen, so the 36 inches or even less could occur without issue.
So, Micah, to that point, if I just have a little galley kitchen that's not leading to an exit, is that even a passageway? And what requirement am I have to adhere to then?
Well, if you read the rest of the sentence, it's a passageway between the counterfronts and appliances or counterfronts and walls. So,
but is the galley kitchen a dead-end galley? Is that a passageway?
I wouldn't say I wouldn't say it's a passageway, but maybe we change that language to be, clear space in front of counters and appliances.
Yeah, I think that's what we're trying to do is just get as simple as possible and
right.
strip it down
Sure.
to
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a great
again,
question.
it might be Captain Obvious, but you know.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Michael.
I was going to agree with Micah, and actually, I
Hmm.
had my hand up so that I could correct the door size. IBC 1010.1 is for the IBC section where the clear opening width is 32 inches. So I apologize that I was saying 34 with that. So thank you, Micah, for correcting that. But everything else, I agree with what he was saying with all of that. And it's not necessarily part of the exit. It can be, a passageway or any of that, but just still the maneuverability spaces. I think if it is part of the exit, then it definitely needs to be at least the a minimum width. But go from there.
Okay. Maybe getting there. Go ahead, Dustin.
I just wanted to point out that I can't help but notice that the 30 inches aligns with like minimum space in front of mechanical appliances and things like that for, maintenance of those things. So the conversation we've been having about, are the appliances usable? I think that that's the design problem that you might have to find. But I think that 30 inches, I'm imagining myself walking through a 30-inch space. It's not necessarily comfortable, but is it better than not having the space in the first place as well? Um, I don't hate 30 inches, but I think that it works and is kind of in alignment with some stuff elsewhere in the code as far as a minimum space in front of something. Just
Yeah.
want to point out that it lines up with some of that.
Yeah. No, okay. I'll keep quiet. Thank you. Go ahead, Michael.
I think his might have been left up.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Hoyt. Go ahead, Hoyt.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, this is what happens in the codes at all the ones I've been to, the code hearings. Um, we're getting different opinions and one at 30 inches, 36 inches. I mean, we're talking 6 inches. Um, you know, I'm going off my professional experience for how long I've done these and questions that come in. I'm just giving you my personal opinion. I think 3 feet is correct. I think because we're going into a place where we're kind of making up code right now for these specific type of structures. If it comes down to the next cycle, they want to move it down to 30 inches. Okay, I mean, I'd be more fun, but I have a hard time reducing something, and then later on you find out that, oh wait, that wasn't correct. It needs to be bigger. Well, they're already built, so unless I can see someone specifically say this is good, I would just stay with 3 feet. But I'm just telling you the way I'm looking at it. Not that I'm disagreeing with 30 inches. Don't feel, I just don't feel confident enough to actually say, yeah, we could go make it smaller. We're already making the thing smaller anyway. So, so I just want to give that 2 cents.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think we're talking about this one not because this is real critical in saving a lot of space. It's just kind of illustrative of the challenges here, what we're trying to do, because we're not being, I don't think we're being clear of what we're trying to achieve here, except that it's kind of common sense to have space in front of the counter fronts and appliances. Okay, go ahead, Richard, and then
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, I think if you stuck with the 30 inches, I think that word passageway might be, I think you had mentioned it, something that you maybe strike or change. Also, if maybe you add some language, something to the effect of unless we're otherwise required, or something that makes it guides people along to the idea that if this were used as a means of egress, that it's something other than 30 inches. I don't know how you smooth that language out, but write it in such a way that gives you a minimum option and then leads you down the path of a more restrictive requirement if you use it for some other purpose.
yeah, interesting. Go ahead, Micah.
I should say I'm not tied to the 30 inches if we want to change that. Again, I put this in there because the CDU rule was brought up, and folks were really like, hey, that's some of that is really good, and we could accept that. So I was trying to mesh some of the things in there with what's in the current Chapter 12 item. And then I do want to point out in the 2021 IBC commentary for this section, 12018, it says the code provisions allow the circulation of ventilation air through the space while maintaining reasonably sized living quarters for the occupant. It says habitable space is defined, and smaller spaces such as bathrooms, hallways, or passageways that I think Todd was mentioning here do not need to meet the minimum room width because they're not considered habitable rooms. So kind of the kitchen is still considered a habitable room, but the passageway going through it isn't necessarily that. So what's that minimum dimension look like? So again, I'm not tied to it, but that's what the commentary goes for. We're trying to talk about smaller living quarters. Is 36 it? Cool. Yeah, go for it. I'm not tied to it. It was just some suggested language meshing things. Thanks, guys.
Okay,
I should say thanks everyone, guys.
Yeah, that's helpful. All right, Roger.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to put my thoughts out there or not, since I'm just a structural engineer, but I guess two things. I was thinking about language as well when there was conversations earlier on about, can you open an oven door, or some dishwasher or something that you could write that you have to allow that, which kind of forces people to pick a oven or a dishwasher that has a door that fits the 30-inch, if that's what the dimension is. So writing code around it. But I also was going back, looking at RCW 1927-801, which is the charging language for us. So what we are supposed to do, and we are, as the technical advisory group says, we shall provide its recommendation to the council in time for the council to adopt or amend rules or codes as necessary for implementation. I'm looking at item 2 down there. So what I see the tag doing, if it comes down to an opinion or a vote of an opinion, whether it is 30 inches or 36 inches or 24 inches, what I think that really, I'm just going to suggest that it doesn't have to be the tag that makes that decision. The tag could put all the parameters around what we believe is correct and leave the decision of whether this, as long as it isn't, just leave that dimension and present it to the council as, here, there's a lot of conversation about it. Here's the intent of the legislation. There was some concern, and let that be a council decision. The tag can just kind of present a clear idea of that. So just trying to remind us of our end game here, and not where we as a tag have to, we can push some of those decisions up to the council level.
Okay. Thank you, Roger. Let's go with Che, and then I'll try to bring us home a little bit here. Go ahead.
Yeah. Micah referenced the Seattle CDU, so I pulled it up, and the only place where I can see 30 inches there is for a food preparation area, width of a food prep. But so I'm not really sure where the 30 inches come from. I would say that we leave it the way it is.
Okay. And Micah, feel free to respond, but then I'll also prime you with a question here is, going deep on this kind of conversation, do you think we can get to a simpler dimension only section, or do you think we need dimension and area still? But go ahead and respond to whatever you were going to respond to.
I don't know on that. And Shay, you're right. It is about food preparation area, but I think everybody assumes that's what the kitchen is for. And then Roger, thanks for reminding us, kind of where we go with the RCW. I did want to bring up that part of what we're discussing here is not just the RCW. It is the list that we have put together for topics.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of where I was going with some of this. It's like we are covering the things that are on that list. What is cooking in the definition of dwelling unit? What's that look like? Is that an oven like Hoyt mentioned or others? Is it a hot plate? Is it a cooktop, a microwave? Um, so it's that kind of question that this is leading to. I agree with you. Maybe you don't need to set a dimension, but again, if a kitchen doesn't have to meet the minimum room width, what does it have to meet? And maybe the answer is nothing. But I'm not tied to this dimension, but that's where I was going with that. But thanks for Roger for reminding us of that, because yeah, they could definitely make some decision points there at the council level. So thanks.
But thank you for reminding us, because we did talk about this before. What is cooking? What is sleeping? What is whatever? And what's the area or dimension that is needed to do that activity? Both like the minimum practical, but also just kind of an equitable, that is part of the code of just we need space, we need daylight, we need ventilation.
Yeah, I
So
mean, that comes down to the definition of dwelling unit, because all these things tie into that definition. And if we're not setting a minimum size for that dwelling unit, then the combination of all those four items, what do they look like to create a dwelling unit? And are there minimum sizes for each of those? It says yes in 12081. Any habitable space has to have that 7-foot dimension. So yeah, it's everything tied together. I'm trying to look at it as a whole picture and not just the 1208.1 and the space in front of the appliances. Thanks.
and I guess what I was trying to, get out of today was, if we put these dimensions, then dimensions can overlap. Areas are a little harder, to do that, right? Unless someone disagrees with that. That's kind of what I was wondering, is there might be space that's used for dual purposes and has the dimensional standards, but we were able to get a smaller area because through design, I guess. Go ahead, Leah.
My opinion is I agree with Micah. I support reducing the width in today's homes, especially micro units. Every inch really counts. When we require a full 36-inch passageway, it often forces designers to give up valuable space elsewhere. But if we allow a 30-inch minimum instead, it gives them a lot more flexibility to create layouts that still work. So if 30-inch is the minimum, someone can design it to be more flexible. But for safety egress concerns, as mentioned previously, maybe we can revise the language to say something like shall have a clear passageway that's not an egress path of not less than 30 inches or something. And I think it is important to have a minimum stated in code so that it's not 18 inches.
Okay, thank you, Leah. And I guess you made a good point here. Are those just two separate things? I'm looking at our topic list here. It's just obviously we need a certain dimension for a passageway, certain dimension for cooking. Those might be the same space, but maybe it's not appropriate that they're combined considerations in the kitchen section. Okay, now as much fun as we're having here, we are going to only have about 10, 15 minutes left. Maybe go ahead, Michael, but I'm kind of wondering, do you want to keep talking about dimensions? And so that, because I think then from the conversation, a couple of us can go actually write code or amend this code and bring it back next time. So then we say, yeah, that's what we all meant.
I was
Or
going to be
disagree.
more summary anyway.
Yeah. Go ahead, please. Yeah, of course.
We may be redundant anyway, because in 1208.1, whatever is established there, down in the 1208.5 for the efficiency dwelling units, number 3, we do have 30 inches for clear working space. So maybe redundant anyway. The other point I wanted to make is the 1208.5, the efficiency dwelling unit, those 4 things I think are really important. And so I think we don't want to lose those. The difficulty here is from a code structure. Here we're talking about 1208 interior space dimensions. So in there, now we're also adding, well, you have to have cooking, you have to have a refrigerator, you have to have all that. It's almost a lack of anywhere else to put it, unless it became part of a definition. But essentially, we're working with what we have. I my strongest point here is I don't think we should lose those 4 bullets in here somehow, however it's structured. I think it's important to keep that information. I think it's important, the closet, for example, isn't mentioned anywhere else, nor is it really mentioned anywhere else that you have to have a bathroom that has a water closet, lavatory, and bathtub or shower. So somehow we need to make sure that we're still incorporating all that, not just blowing that part away, in my opinion.
And Micah, did you cross this? I don't remember.
Yeah, this is the proposal I sent to you.
Yeah.
Those items for dwelling units, I believe, are captured in other sections of the code.
Okay.
For kitchens and restrooms and sanitation facilities, things like that. So I think it is specific in efficiency dwelling unit because it's considered in one room, and I think they want to specify that those items will still have to be outside of that one room. So that's it. I'll stop.
Okay.
Got other hands up.
But the language here is more aligned with what we were talking about, right? Having a clear working space of not less than 30 inches.
Sure, if you want to apply that to all dwelling units, I think that's probably
I see what you're saying.
clear
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's already applying to all dwelling units, you don't need to have it separate for efficiency dwelling units, because if you look at the other section I've done here is I've eliminated 12083 that doesn't set a minimum square footage of habitable space, but it does for other than the one room of 120 and then other habitable rooms of 70. It maintains that language, but then it's not relevant for efficiency dwelling units. It's all you're identifying for the required dwelling unit habitable room is one of 120. One space of 120 square feet. So
yeah,
that's kind of the thought behind that. Again, this was just let's discuss and try to put together everything as a whole.
No, it's better to look at language. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Paul. Wait, and we have 8 minutes left, everyone.
Yeah, so all I was going to say is, the efficiency dwelling unit, it could just be, instead of efficiency dwelling unit, it could be components of a dwelling unit, that are required instead of that. Because, I think there's a definition of dwelling unit which includes all these things, but maybe not as specific, like for the writing surface, for example. But as a general sense, I think you're right. We need to keep it, but maybe we just rename the section or something.
Okay. That was Paul, right? Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Hoyt.
Yeah, I just want to compare. We shouldn't be comparing to the efficiency dwelling units. The problem is with efficiency dwelling units, they have type A and B. The reason it actually goes down is because you can't use 30 inches if you have to turn around. There's no exception to that. I mean, that goes to the ANSI code. So what happens, there has to be an actual, in the ANSI code, you can have 30 inches depending how your direction of you're going, because I know how that got in there. So, I think efficiency dwelling units, and then if you go back up, what Mike is putting in are two different things. All right. They're not the same. We're doing something where we're just trying to make smaller units, but it still needs, where you have to have an accessible unit that's required for XYZ reasons, you need to meet that. So that was the reason why I just said, and I know Mike has said doesn't matter. I would like to keep, if it comes to a vote, I'm going to vote against it just for that reason. I think 3 feet should be the correct one. It does not have to meet the type A and type B type of units in there. So,
okay, that's helpful. Okay, Che.
Yes, I want to go back to the last meeting that I attended on this matter, where we had David Neiman present a version of this Section 1208, and also with an article that he wrote giving dimensions to these units, and which I thought made a lot of sense. Do we have a record of that, Dustin? Is that something that you can share with the team? I'd like to review that against this. The proposal of Micah.
Yeah, I can get that. I don't have it uploaded for today's meeting, but it's definitely in the history meeting. documents. So if you want, I can pull that up and I can send that out to the group.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Che. Go ahead, Mike, and
Just
then I
to
have a
add, I
question.
think that one was headed the right direction.
Okay. I need to go revisit that too because I don't think I was there. Thank you, Che. Go ahead, Micah.
Yeah, I think David's was going towards just the 70 square foot straight across. But I
Okay.
don't think it took into account all the other room dimensions or other items in 1208. But we can come back to that one. I think it'd be a good comparison. Justin, if you can scroll down to the 12083 on this one, it really, and maybe I should have broken this out not in order, because the strike through and underline of efficiency dwelling unit really comes down to if you want to accept the size of what I'm striking through in 12084, or is what's left of 12084, which is the dwelling unit size, have one room of 120 and the others would be 70. The rest of this code proposal kind of hinges on that, aside from the 30-inch kitchen item. But if you don't want to go that route and you want to go smaller, you're still going to end up with these same questions because you're eliminating a minimum dwelling unit size area. And I'm going to jump back to the efficiency dwelling unit item and striking that through, and why for all dwelling units it's not necessary, because toilet and bathroom facilities are in 1210. And then the separate closets. The closets aren't required at all in dwelling units. So again, when you put all that into one room, it was kind of a, hey, you're going to be allowed to do this in one space, but you need to provide some additional items in that space, which is the closet and other things. So I don't know. I think Michael had talked about maybe keeping the bullet points in or from the efficiency dwelling units, but I think it's covered elsewhere because those things are required elsewhere in the building code. I
Okay.
appreciate the discussion today. Thanks, folks.
Yeah, likewise. I think this has been helpful. Okay, I want to make people uncomfortable. So capturing all of this energy we had today and giving guidance to then next steps. Can I just pose the question of why do we have a minimum area? If it can we achieve it all with dimensions? And is that an okay pathway to at least go down a thought journey on? I know it's going to make people uncomfortable, but someone
I could
explain
tell you why
why.
you have why you have a minimum area
Yeah.
is the reason why, because people put in other things throughout there that are not defined in the code. So what the code wanted to end up doing is just put a minimum area. Now, generally exactly what we're talking about, yeah, you start putting these other things in, they start putting other requirements, but the code actually says we want at least this minimum area for someone for habitable space. That was why. They didn't want people to, if you didn't have a minimum area, there'd be people, and they do this in other countries where they have a lot smaller spaces. I mean, I was in a airport. I mean, I know this isn't a dwelling unit where you could basically sleep in a coffin, I called it. So they just wanted a minimum area. And I do think it's not a bad idea to keep a minimum area. I actually like that because, if it is, people are going to go smaller, then they're going to start chasing other things. I think a minimum area was just to make sure we at least had something that was a minimum size.
Okay. No, thank you. All right. Okay, Micah and then Michael, and then we'll call it.
Thanks for that question, Todd. I'm definitely open to that, but Hoyt kind of touched on it, and I'll agree with him on that, is that you're going to have to look at other barriers. What can encroach into that 7-foot minimum dimension at that point? And I think that's why if you have 120 square foot, you can have that 7 square foot or that 7-foot dimension somewhere, but then you have other space to encroach into that. So I think I know where you're going with that, but I'm concerned that you may get into more complicated questions in how to put those items into code. Like, how do you address beds? How do you address built-ins? How do you address couches into that 7-foot dimension if that's all you're looking at? So
yeah, I think that is going to be the gap there, isn't it? Yeah. Okay.
So I just
Michael,
need 10 seconds. Can we
you get the last word?
Can we satisfy the legislation if we were to just delete 1208.3 and leave everything else alone. That's it.
I'll answer. I think so. It's a good question, but I think you will open up some more questions on the efficiency dwelling unit. And that's what I had. And I think that's kind of where I was going with this proposal, Michael, is just eliminating 12083. But then that led to the discussion of, if you're really only looking at one room, do you really need the efficiency dwelling unit extras in the code? If you do, cool. If you don't, I think this proposal gets you really close to what you're talking about.
I like the definition of it, but yeah, it just seems like that it could be simple. And maybe it's a matter of efficiency dwelling units and minimum units or something, and or I don't know, maybe it's making those efficiency dwelling units the minimum units possible. Don't know.
I think
But,
it's a good
yeah.
question, Michael. Well, okay, so
I like where it's all going.
I do too, and I like this conversation, and I think this section is small enough. I think all of our homework should be to come back with what we heard today and submit it. And I mean, maybe not everyone will, but that's what I'm gonna do. And let's all share that, and then so we can move forward. But I think this was healthy, and this was the kind of conversation at least I wanted to have. So thank you. Okay. All right. We are adjourned. Appreciate it.
One quick note on the next meeting we got a December 18th meeting where we're talking about temporary emergency shelters.
Yep.
The next Thursday is Christmas, and then the next Thursday after that is New Year's Day. So we likely won't be touching base on this one until January 8th.
Okay. That sounds good. Thank you for that.
All right.
Hey, I
Thanks,
want to say
everybody.
one thing before everyone gets off. Hey, have
Go
a
ahead.
happy holidays and
Yes.
a happy new year. That's all I want to say.
Yes, thanks, Hoyt.
Likewise.
Everybody, do what Hoyt says. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
Very welcome.